Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome everybody to Sikh Channel and to our conversation about Black Lives Matter and the current events we're seeing in America and the allyship we're seeing all across the world. Today we'll be joined with two guests, one from Canada, Manveer Singh, and the other guest from San Antonio, Texas, Soorma Singh, who will be joining us to have this conversation about what this movement means, what this movement means to Sikhs, and how we can learn from each other to be better and stronger and more effective allies to our Black brothers and sisters. And with that, I would like to welcome both of our guests to this discussion.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. And, before we begin, I'll share a quick intro about the both of you. So first, Manveer Singh is a community member on the unceded Coast Salish territories of Kwantlen, Katsi, Siamamu, Siwawen. I'm sorry, Manveer Singh, I butchered those
It's okay.
pronunciations. Siwasen territories of First Nations in North Delta in British Columbia, Canada. And Manveer Singh is deeply passionate about politics, social justice, and the ways in which they are manifested in Sikhi. And next we've got Soorma Singh from San Antonio, Texas. And that for me is very special because it gives me a fellow Southerner on this call. I grew up in Georgia, so it's nice to have some representation. Soorma Singh is a YouTuber and a social media influencer. He loves to entertain and make people feel good, which he considers to be one of the greatest forms of seva. And with that, welcome to you both, and thank you so much for being a part of this much needed discussion today. Soorma Singh, I know you like to make people feel good, but I think today with this conversation, we'll have to make people feel a bit uncomfortable so that we can start learning, so we can start growing, and we can evolve in our own understandings of this movement, of what our role as Sikhs needs to be in this movement, and for Manveer and myself, our role as non-Black people of color and what we can do to be supportive moving forward. So I think first, we should just kind of set the stage, go over some of the basics so that anybody that is joining us has an understanding of what the movement is, what it stands for, and why it's so incredibly important. So, with that, we'll start our discussion about what is Black Lives Matter and why are millions protesting across the world, right? We've got protests all over the US in all 50 states. We've got protests in Paris, Nairobi, London. Every big city in the world is protesting. This is major. This is big, right? So what is the movement and why is everybody so moved by it? Go for it.
I think the Black Lives Matter movement is, the newest form of the civil rights movement, I would say. In the original civil rights movement with Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and all of the people that we read about in history, it was for getting just the same basic rights any other white human being had in the US, and that was our main focus. But now, the Black Lives Matter movement is a civil rights movement, but it's a civil rights movement with a certain purpose. We have a certain pandemic, if you will, that is sweeping our nation that we need to focus on. And it is the senseless, unjustified killing of African Americans in this country. This is illegal. This is uncalled for, but there seems to be nothing done about it. And we've been marching for a long, long time. We've been peacefully protesting for a long, long time. And the reason why this movement is so different is because for the longest time we've been marching 99% by ourselves, I will say. But to see the Black Lives Matter movement go global, we are living as Reverend Al Sharpton said, someone who I adore, at George Floyd's memorial in Minneapolis. It's a different time. It's a different era, and it's a different attitude. And it's something that we all take a part in because we're all a much more considerate society where we can put ourselves in other shoes, and we know that if that happened to our family member, we wouldn't like it at all. And so it's really a civil rights movement with a purpose, with a great purpose, and a specific purpose that is for this time.
Right. And if it wasn't a great purpose, we wouldn't have seen gatherings in big cities and small cities. I think we've seen some people who are lone protesters in their small towns, right? People really are finding that courage, finding that fire within themselves, even if they're the only ones out there, which I know, and I know Soorma knows this too, can be incredibly hard in the Deep South.
Yeah.
Right. When I see that, I am so happy. I am so proud. But that is because people really believe in this idea of equity, right? And this idea that we all deserve to be treated the exact same. And we've seen protests in New Zealand, in Europe, and I'm sure, Manveer Singh, can you share a little bit about what it looks like in Canada and the support for
Well, yeah, it's definitely a thing in Canada. And one of the issues we have in Canada is that people here pretend that this is just an issue that's down in the States, when we need to accept the uncomfortable truth that Black people very much are being killed up north of the border here as well. And I want to say the name of a victim who was recently killed. Her name is Regis Korchinski-Paquette in Toronto, Canada. And it's manifested in many of the same ways here in Canada too. People are mobilizing. People who haven't ever been vocal are now being vocal about social justice and about inequalities in society. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to explain a little bit of what was said in Punjabi, just for our Punjabi folks who may be tuning in. So ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ Black Lives Matter ਲਹਿਰ ਆ, ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਕ੍ਰਾਂਤੀਕਾਰੀ ਲਹਿਰ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਬਲੈਕ ਸੱਜਣ ਮਿੱਤਰ ਆ ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਦੇਰ ਤੋਂ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਨੂੰ ਸਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਜਦ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਤਸੀਹੇ ਝੱਲਣੇ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਆ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ, ਸਟੇਟ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ, ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਹਿਣ ਦੀ ਹੱਦ ਟੁੱਟ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ। ਤੇ ਉਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਫਿਰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਲਹਿਰ ਉੱਠਦੀ ਆ, ਉਹ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੋ ਲੋਕੀ ਸਟਰੀਟਸ ਤੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਬਲੈਕ ਫੋਕਸ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਈ ਸਿੱਖ ਲੋਕ ਵੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਦੂਸਰਾ ਸਮਰਥਨ ਦੇਣ ਲਈ। ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਆ ਵੀ ਜੋ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਬਹੁਤ ਗਲਤ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਤੇ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਆ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਹੋਵੇ, ਇਹ ਸਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੇਂਜ ਆਉਣੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਆ। So basically, for the English speakers, I was saying that this is a sign that business as usual is not possible anymore. We need a change. There needs to be a systemic change. I mean, for me, one of the biggest shockers was seeing people who you wouldn't think speaking up now are speaking up. Like there was a YouTuber, won't name him, who has been very problematic in the past, but even he, whether it's genuine or not, came out and said something. And he said that we need to re-engineer the system that has been put in place, because we need to accept that the status quo is inherently racist and it's inherently inequitable to Black people and Indigenous people and people of color.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I would have ever even thought that, Nickelodeon would have a moment of silence, right? They would stop their programming, their streaming for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to honor George Floyd. And this past weekend, we saw Sesame Street's, lesson on racism and what all of this means. So it's incredible, how much action we are willing to take, and that's amazing, right? I think we need to keep doing exactly that. We need to keep reimagining how else can we get this message out, right? By having conversations, by people that have the platforms, whether or not they've been problematic in the past, right, are using it for something good now. And the more people do that, the more aware everyone can be. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your parents and your families, don't let them shut down this conversation. Yeah. So I think this helps us cover the grounds for this conversation, why we are talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. And with that comes another loaded conversation. When we say Black Lives Matter, some people, and some even in our own community, immediately go, no, but all lives matter, right? So I think if we just kind of get this addressed right away, right, get this elephant out of the room, maybe we can talk about something that is more substantive. So what are both of y'all's take on how to explain the, Black Lives Matter versus all lives matter?
Well, I use this analogy to them. Say there's a house on fire, and you notice the house is on fire, and you say, oh my God, that's not good. Somebody's house is on fire. Let me go help them. But somebody is standing next to you whose house is not on fire, but they say, well, what about my house? Your house matters too, but your house is not on fire. There's clearly a house down the street that's on fire, and they're in need of just a little bit more help than you.
Mm-hmm.
So how about you leave your house in the condition that it is? Your house will be there when we get back, and let's go help the people whose house is on fire. But they're stubborn and they say, no, but my house matters too. Yeah. That is exactly what you are doing when you're saying that. We're not saying that your house doesn't matter. We're not saying that your life doesn't matter. We're not saying that white lives don't matter. We're not saying that Latino lives don't matter. We're not saying that Sikh lives don't matter. But there is a certain group of people who are getting it worse than everyone else. They need that help. We need that help.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think one example I saw over the weekend explained in a Gurmat school setting, for, some equivalent of Sunday school for kids, right? That you can explain it to kids and even your family staff. You go to the doctor and your arm's broken, but the doctor wants to focus on every other bone you've got in your body. Does that really make sense? Right? So for all of the Punjabi listeners, ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਕੋਲ ਜਾਓ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਸਿਰਫ ਬਾਂਹ ਟੁੱਟੀ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਨਰਸ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਣੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਬਾਕੀ ਹੱਡੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਫੋਕਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹਣ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹਣ ਜੋ ਠੀਕ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਉਨੀ ਕੇਅਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ, ਰਾਈਟ? ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਟੁੱਟੀ ਬਾਂਹ ਨੂੰ ਕੌਣ ਦੇਖੇਗਾ? Right? Who will care for your broken arm? Who will fix that broken arm if you're focused on all of the other completely, functional and working bones in your body? And I think that I plan to use that, for the Gurmat kids that we teach, because I think it's a great way to explain the kids that, you focus where the injury is. If everything else is not injured, you don't have a bruise, a burn anywhere else on your body, you focus on what needs the fixing.
Mm-hmm.
any thoughts on these?
I definitely agree, and I just want to translate that house example into Punjabi as well because it was amazing. ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਭਾਈ ਜੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਜੋ ਹੁਣ ਲੋਕੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਬਲੈਕ ਲਾਈਵਸ ਮੈਟਰ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਮਝਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਜੀ ਬਲੈਕ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਅਹਿਮੀਅਤ ਰੱਖਦੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਈ ਲੋਕੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਾਰੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਅਹਿਮੀਅਤ ਰੱਖਦੀਆਂ ਹਨ ਮਤਲਬ ਵੀ ਕਹਿਣ ਦੇ ਭਾਵ ਬਈ ਹਾਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀਆਂ ਅਹਿਮੀਅਤ ਰੱਖਦੀਆਂ ਹਨ ਪਰ ਜੋ ਬਲੈਕ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ ਤੇ ਸੂਰਮਾ ਭਾਜੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਵੀ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ ਵੀ ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਅੱਗ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਅੱਗ ਬੁਝਾਉਣ ਚੱਲੇ ਆ ਪਰ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਗੁਆਂਢੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਖੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਦਾ ਘਰ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਠੀਕ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆ ਕੇ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਤੂੰ ਉਹਦੇ ਘਰ ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿਉਂ ਸੋਚ ਰਿਹਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਘਰ ਵੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਆ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਘਰ ਵੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਆ ਪਰ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਅੱਗ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੋਆ ਸੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਜੇ ਅੱਗ ਲਾ ਕੇ ਬੁਝਾਈਏ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਦੀ ਮਹੱਤਵਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਮਝ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਚੋਂ ਸ਼ੋ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ ਵੀ systemic racism like it shows how much systemic racism there is, the way that black voices are being decentered, the way that like it's being seen as a competition almost, and it's not at the end of the day like if there were some sort of brownie points being given to someone, why would like first of all why is Black Lives Matter a thing? It's a thing because people who are black are being treated as less than. Why would you want that? Why would you choose that upon yourself? Like why do people think that this is like some sort of like I don't know, like this is some sort of competition when it's not. Yeah. It's a outcry of outrage that black siblings are being killed all over the world for being black, and it needs to stop.
Mm-hmm. Right, it's not saying that only Black Lives Matter, but it's rather saying Black Lives Matter too. ਵੀ ਸਿਰਫ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਅਹਿਮਤ ਰੱਖਦੀਆਂ ਬਲਕਿ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਵੀ ਅਹਿਮਤ ਰੱਖਦੀ ਹੈ. And I think that that's a great distinction that, both of y'all helped us understand today. Okay, this helps us clear really some of those grounds and helps us build a foundation for this conversation. So a question for both of y'all: how can Sikhs in our country, so in America and Canada, be better and effective allies, right? What are some of the lesser known facts or history that we have in this country that we must start talking about and start reflecting on? And, with that, I mean, is there enough knowledge around immigration and how our community even got access to be able to move here? Does that education exist? Does that information exist in a way that is accessible? Right? Do we understand the Ghadar movement? Right? Do we understand the Punjabi Suba movement? Do we understand Dharam Yudh Morcha? Right? None of these things, the marching, the gathering, the protesting, it's not foreign to our community. Right? So what can we learn from all of these? Or, do we need to start talking about all of this stuff at our camps, at our gurdwaras, at our Gurmat classes? And, what can Sikhs do in Canada and America to be better and more effective allies?
I will say I've been a guest at a couple of events that where Black Lives Matter is a topic of discussion. And one thing that I've noticed, or a couple of things that I've noticed, is that not a lot of our older generation Punjabis have the knowledge of what actually happened to African Americans in this country, what our history is in this country. They may know a little bit about slavery. They may know a little bit about Martin Luther King. And they may know those things. They may know about the March on Washington and the I Have a Dream speech. They don't know exactly how bad the treatment of Black people in this country was. And there are many resources. There's apparently this documentary on Netflix called 13th. I haven't watched it yet. One of my friends sent me the link, and she was like, I watched this, and I was so mad after seeing this. And even though, my friend is Punjabi, she won't be able to understand what it's like to have that experience as a Black person, but she is a human. And she does understand what it would feel like for her if her people were treated this way. And it infuriated her. So if we could push, in the Sikh community, especially in the Punjabi Sikh community, to educate themselves, read more things, watch more things, actually get a grasp of what it was like to be Black in this country 400 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a first step. But another thing that I've noticed, people are saying, why are the Sikh people or Sikh community having discussions about Black Lives Matter? Has nothing to do with us. We should focus on Sikh issues. Let me cut you off right there.
Please.
Because number one, as a Sikh, this is what we are here to do. When Guru Gobind Singh Ji started the Khalsa, he created the Khalsa to restore humanity, to help those who needed help, to speak out for those who don't have a voice, or to speak out those whose voices have been muted for a very long time. Yeah. It is our job. It is our responsibility to do things like this. Mm-hmm. This is why the Khalsa was created. So that being said, every single issue that concerns the fall of humanity is a Sikh issue, point blank, period. There's no extra emphasis needed on that. Because what if Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji said, I'm sorry, Hindu Pandits, your issue is not a Sikh issue. You handle that yourself. Did Guruji say that? No, he did not. He got up and he went and he sacrificed his life. You don't have to choose between, I understand our Panth has a lot of issues that we need to deal with internally. But at the same time, when Guru Arjan Dev Ji did their Shahidi for a Sikh issue, Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji did their Shahidi for a quote unquote non-Sikh issue. You don't have to choose between the two. You can do both. And I've said this 1,000 times to a lot of my Sikh friends. You don't have to choose. You do both at the same time.
And we'll say it 1,000 times more, right? Because if we keep looking, we'll have a long list of examples, right? Did Guru Amar Das Ji turned his back to Sati, saying, oh, that's a female issue, not my thing, not my problem, y'all deal with it, right? No, did Guru Nanak Sahib be like, I moved away from the caste system, so I don't have to deal with it anymore? No, I think, right, even before we get to Guru Gobind Singh Sahib, we've got Guru Nanak Sahib who traveled so many miles, right? Just so people could start understanding Ik Onkar, right? Just so we can start seeing that oneness among all of us, right? It's not just limited to Sikhs, not just limited to whoever is born as a Sikh. It is limited to all of humanity, to the whole universe. All of this goes beyond our Panth. And you're right in saying that if this is hurting humanity, it becomes a Sikh issue very quickly.
Absolutely. And just another quick thing I would like to bring up, and this is something that I feel from my heart. We don't understand, Sikhi right now, we're a fairly young spiritual tradition, but we are aging And we are, going through processes that most spiritual traditions go through as they get older. More people hear about it and more people want to partake into it. Sikhi is growing vastly. When I came into Sikhi 5 years ago, I was the only African American Sikh in the Houston community, really. I didn't have any other connections with any other African American Sikhs. I felt like I was the only one. 5 years later, I get DMs all the time from people of different cultures and backgrounds saying, how did you get into Sikhi? I want to learn more about it. I'm converted to Sikhi. I need help. People from all different races and religious backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. This is eventually going to be an issue that affects the Sikh community because there are so many African American and other stepped upon communities who are becoming part of the Sikh faith. Is this only going to become a Sikh issue if I get pulled over by a police officer and they put their knee on my neck and I die? Will it become a Sikh issue then?
Mm-hmm.
That's my question.
And I think that uncovers a bigger issue, which is the kind of Punjabi supremacy we have in Sikh spaces. Like we forget that when in Vaisakhi 1699, when Guru Gobind Singh Ji established the Panj Pyare, only one of them was Punjabi. The rest of them were from all over, right? And so we have this very narrow lens of what a Sikh is and what are Sikh issues. And I also want to bring up a holiday, a major holiday we celebrate. It's going to come up in a few months. We're going to be lighting like dive, we're going to be eating sweets. But do we actually think about what happened? I'm talking about Bandi Chhod Divas, or what people know as Diwali. But for Sikhs, it's Bandi Chhod Divas. Guru Har Gobind Sahib, he was a teenager at the time, but he still knew that his freedom is conditional upon the freedom of others. When the jailer gave him that freedom, that Guru Sahib, you're allowed to leave, Guru Sahib didn't say, okay, I'm going to pack my bags and head back to Amritsar. He's like, no, I'm not going to leave until these other 52 people that you have illegally arrested and persecuted are freed along with me. And this is the Guru Sikhi. The Guru Sikhi is if we see anyone, no matter who they are, no matter what race, gender, sexuality they are, if we see them being oppressed, it is imperative upon us to act. That's why we have our Kirpan. It's not just a symbol of that, but it's a manifestation of that. And I think to bring it back to not just Sikh history, but the civil rights movement, immigration in Canada followed a different lens because Canada was still very much a British colony. But in the United States, a lot of South Asian immigration happened because I love this line Hassan Minhaj said in one of his videos. When Martin Luther King got the voting bill signed, he CC'd us. He CC'd our communities. We are here because of the civil rights movement. Like, we owe our existence of Sikhi in America to Black freedom fighters like Martin Luther King. So if you're not going to do it as a Sikh, do it as an indebted American, The fact that your family is here in America today because of these people, and because of the lineage of revolution that's carried through into Black Lives Matter. And it's just, at the end of the day, man, it's just, you're a human being. If you're watching another human being suffer and you're saying, why should I step in because they are this or they are that, I'm going to question your humanity, because it shouldn't, forget even the Sikh history. At the end of the day, if you're a human, you need to care for other humans. And the fact of the matter is humans are being grouped into these systematic places of privilege, race, and at the very moment, Black people are being persecuted left, right, and center. And there is a racial problem, and we are complicit in it as South Asians, as non-Black POC. I'm just going to say a quick blurb in Punjabi as well for the Punjabi speaking audience. ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸਿਧਾਂਤ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਖ 'ਚ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਆਪਣਾ ਇਹ ਫਰਜ਼ ਬਣਦਾ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਉੱਠੀਏ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਹੱਕ ਲਈ ਲੜੀਏ। ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਰਪਾਨ ਵੀ ਬਖਸ਼ੀ ਆ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਸ਼ਿੰਗਾਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਚਿੰਨ੍ਹ ਆ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਚੇਤਾ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਵੀ ਆਪਣਾ ਇੱਕ ਫਰਜ਼ ਹੈ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਉੱਠਣਾ। ਇਹ ਮੈਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਹਰਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਦੀ ਦੂਸਰਾ ਮਿਸਾਲ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਸੀਗੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਬੰਦੀ ਛੋੜ ਦਾਤਾ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਗਵਾਲੀਅਰ ਜੇਲ੍ਹ 'ਚੋਂ ਫ੍ਰੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਆਪੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਬੋਰੀਆ ਬਿਸਤਰ ਬੰਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਵਾਪਸ ਚਲੇ ਗਏ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਉੱਠੂੰਗਾ, ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਜਾਊਂਗਾ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ 52 ਰਾਜਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਛਡਾਓਗੇ। ਸੋ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਆ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਜੇ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਸਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ, ਦੁੱਖ ਸਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ, ਆਪਣੇ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਆਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਦੁੱਖ, ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਰੋਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ।
Yeah, no, I agree, and that couldn't have been said any better, right? That our liberation is collective, right? That we have to care for one another. We have to stand up. It is our dimmivari. It is our farz. We don't have a choice to turn our backs on this, right? We have to make those active decisions every single day. If we believe in the Guru, if we believe we're the Guru's children, if we believe in Ikkonkar, if we believe in, you know, our identity and our ideals and what we stand for, then we have to make the choices to follow those through every single day, no matter how hard it gets. And it can take time, and that's okay, right? Change doesn't happen overnight. Tomorrow morning, after hearing this conversation or reading an amazing book or listening to a great NPR piece from today, you won't be a renewed person tomorrow morning, but you will be on the path to being a better person every single day, right? If we check ourselves every single day, call ourselves out on what can we be doing differently, we will reach that path where we do feel for one another in our own core. So we are compelled to stand up no matter what the issue is. If there is oppression, we don't have the choice to be bystanders. Both of y'all, already touched on a couple other questions I had, right? So we answered how we become better allies. And it is one, by learning the history, understanding that, slavery existed for nearly 250 years. That's a long time. And then we had almost 100 years of Jim Crow. And now more than 50 years of redlining and mass incarceration and so many other issues, right? Learning that history, learning how we got the access to start moving to this country, right? Learning that immigration was restricted to non-whites in the name of white supremacy. Learning that, right, these racially motivated policies were still very much in effect. And if we've moved here after 1965, it is because of the civil rights movement. And then I think ultimately for Sikhs, the answer is rooted in our Guru's teachings. It is rooted in Ikkonkar, even if you don't want to talk about anything else, just focus on that, and that itself can revolutionize you and let you work towards that collective liberation. And the next two questions I had, both of y'all touched on it a little bit about why do we have this responsibility to stand alongside our brothers and sisters, and both of y'all said that by asking, what would the Guru do? And if we look at our history, as both of y'all did, that answer is very clear. There was never a moment of turning our backs. There was never a moment of feeling uncertain about doing something. It was like, okay, this is happening. This is unjust. This does not align with our values of caring for all of humanity. Okay, we must stand against it. And with that, what are some of the behaviors that we need to recognize? and call out in our own community. What can't be normalized? What are some of the small things that we're doing that we need to, check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, basically, right? This is still the time we have to kind of catch ourselves so that we don't go beyond and we don't do more harm and we don't cause any more damage. So what are some of those things that y'all have seen?
Colorism.
I hate that
like, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਮਾੜੇ ਕੁਝ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿ ਦਈਦਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਰੰਗ ਸਾਵਲਾ ਹੈ ਹਨਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਰੰਗ ਕਾਲਾ ਜਾਂ ਕੁੜੇ ਧੁੱਪੇ ਨਾ ਜਾਈ ਤੇ ਰੰਗ ਕਾਲਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਹਨਾ like even just like saying that like oh that person is dark like don't go out in the sun you'll get dark it really it's like so deeply entrenched in our culture from the skin bleaching creams to like the dating preferences in our youth even it's just so deeply entrenched and also just the manner I'm gonna also address another big issue is the manner in which our youth consume media and appropriate things that aren't ours to appropriate. For example, for example, the N-word was used as an oppressive slur against Black folks, and it's been reclaimed by them. But it's been reclaimed only by them. We are not in a space to be using that word. But you'll see our Punjabi Sikh youth that are listening to rap and hip hop, which, like, sure, let's get inspired by these movements, but that word is not yours to use, right? So calling that out, also just ਜਦੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਦੂਸਰਾ ਗੱਲ ਕੀ ਆ there's just we have this kind of characterization of Black folks in our minds and especially in our older generations that we need to get rid of. Like I remember last night I actually hosted a discussion along with 2 other folks from the South Asian community. It was a discussion on how we can be better allies, and that's another thing I want to touch on because we discussed that allyship isn't something we can bestow upon ourselves. It's something we can strive to be, but at the end of the day, it's that community's decision whether they're going to see us as an ally or not, because it's our actions that speak, not our words.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that they're talking about was there was this girl who was going on vacation to Vegas, and her mom said something extremely hurtful, like, be careful of the Black people, they're going to steal your things. ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਆਪਾਂ ਬਲੈਕ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਸਟੇਰੀਓਟਾਈਪ ਜਿਹਾ ਬਣਾ ਲਿਆ ਆਪਣੇ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਠੱਗੀਆਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਪੁੱਠੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਨ 'ਚ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਕੱਢਣੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਪੁੱਠੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈਗੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜੋ ਆਪਣੀ ਦਾੜੇ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਆਪਣੀ ਦਸਤਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਤਵਾਦੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਲੱਗਦੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਅੱਤਵਾਦੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਅੱਤਵਾਦੀ ਦੀ ਨਿਗਾਹ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਦੁੱਖ ਲੱਗਦਾ when they see our turban and our beard they see a terrorist we feel hurt by that so why can't we understand that racial stereotypes at any other community are just as hurtful and in fact they're more hurtful coming from us as people of color when we're perpetuating that against Black folks.
Yeah, saying those words does not make you cool. Any of the youth that's listening, it makes you very uncool. Saying the N-word does not win you the popular contest. It will land you in some muddy waters. But, those are both great points. And I agree with you on the colorism, too. I know I've heard it so many times. You must have never had any problems. You're so fair. You're so light-skinned for a Punjabi. You're so... fill in the blanks by random aunties that I don't know at Gurdwara, just feeling the need to comment, but also to do it in a way that is very hurtful. And again, if we believe in, oh God, why does the color of the skin matter so much? Why don't you let your kids play outside? Why don't you think of all of these things that are really holding us back. And I think when we're saying the 2 examples you shared are important, but also, small, that we can start making those shifts, right? We can start making those adjustments because, we don't need to be saintly to stop saying the N-word.
And it's deeply ingrained to the colorism. Like if we look at iconography in Sikhi, for example, like there's two main examples, the Shahid Dev Guru Arjan Dev Ji and the Shahid Dev Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji. When we look at icons that depict those historic events, Guru Sahib is always shown as a fair figure. And the executioners that are executing him are always these dark figures in the background. Or even Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Like Guru Nanak Dev Ji walked on foot in the blazing hot sun. Do you think he's gonna look like Santa Claus? Like,
I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
That we completely throw logic out of the window.
Yeah.
And, don't want to think that, maybe Guru Sahib had hand. Maybe, he wasn't like Santa Claus. And it matters so much, these visuals, these imagery, and we see that everywhere, right? We see that in our homes. And that's, one of the things where, our intent of having that imagery is great, but what is the impact, right? What message are you really sending if all of your imagery is rooted in that idea of, associating a color with good and bad? It's crazy, but it's it's comical that we even have to say this stuff out loud. Right? We shouldn't have been at the stage that these are the things we are having to examine. But I am glad we're doing it, and I'm glad they're small enough for us to make the shifts in our own minds and reframe how we view color in our community. Awesome. Thank you for, sharing two things that we can immediately start working on. Okay, I think we've got 15 minutes left, but we've got a whole lot of conversation left. So I'll try to join some of the questions I had for both of y'all. And just a couple more, right? So now we've seen these gatherings, these uprisings, these disruptions for nearly 10 days. Are they working?
Oh, that's a hard question.
I know, and we've got less than 15 minutes, Soorma Singh.
It's a new thing right now. George Floyd's viewing was today. I just came back from that. By the way, if you want to know, our brother looks so peaceful. He looks like he's out of all of his pain and suffering, and that is amazing to me. But his funeral is tomorrow, and I have a strong feeling that we're not just gonna put the man in the ground and just let it be. It's going to go on for a while. And what's so different about this movement versus every other protest, every other riot that has happened after every other innocent killing of an African American, this is really sticking. Like, we realize, okay, this has gone way too far. We have all the time in the world, because I could have sworn 2-3 weeks ago we were just battling a worldwide pandemic and we're all at home with nothing to do, nothing to worry about. And this is why this movement is so different. I would like to believe that in previous movements we just didn't have the time and we just didn't have the obligation. But now, since we're all at home and we ain't got nothing to do, this is the opportunity. This is the time. And I think there have been one too many killings with George Floyd, and I think this one is actually going to be effective in some manner. We already have police forces and precincts all across the country who are already changing the rules and changing how they're going to deal with certain issues like this, and changing their practices of restraint and all that kind of stuff. So change is actually being made. For God's sake, the words Black Lives Matter are painted on a street leading to the White House. If that does not say something, I don't know what will. Things are changing out there. It's a totally different time. And, I think it's going to be actually really effective, to be honest. And if it isn't, I'm going to be surprised.
Yeah. No, I don't think it ends here. I think people are invested in justice. People are invested in, compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Justice is rooted in our compassion and our shared humanity. So I don't think it, ends with George Floyd, right? Maybe many other cases might be reopened. And I know earlier today and yesterday, I was reading about Mr. Gordon in New Jersey, right? Those audios and video files got released today.
Wow.
And that had happened 2 days before George Floyd's death on May 25th. This had happened on May 23rd. But, as this starts coming into light, as more people learn about it, it might even inspire them more, because this is beyond one person, right? This is about the collective liberation. This is about all of us. This is about every single family that has been affected.
Right.
I'd agree with you. Manveer, any thoughts?
I think it's absolutely that there's one sign that comes to my mind, and I'm going to be loose with its interpretations given our platform. It said you have messed with the last generation, because it just shows that this has been going on for such a long time, and there's just been so much injustice. And I think it reached its boiling point. And I don't think that this movement is going to be fruitless. Someone was saying that this is honestly the largest global uprising that we have ever seen, because all 50 states were participating and several countries around the world were participating. Punjabi ਚ ਵੀ ਥੋੜੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਦੱਸ ਦਿੰਨਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲਹਿਰ ਆ, ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਡੀ ਲਹਿਰ ਗਿਣੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ 50 ਸਟੇਟਸ ਆ, 50 ਦੇ 50 ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲਿਆ। ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲਿਆ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ, ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ, UK, ਸਾਰੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਲਹਿਰ ਇਹ ਫੈਲੀ ਪਈ ਆ। ਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਨਿਸ਼ਫਲ ਨਿਕਲੂਗੀ। ਕੁਛ ਨਾ ਕੁਛ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਚੇਂਜ ਆ ਆਊਗੀ। ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਭੈਣ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਨਵੇਂ ਕੇਸ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹਣਗੇ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਜੋਰਜ ਫਲੋਇਡ ਨੂੰ ਇਨਸਾਫ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ। ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ 4 ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਆਫਿਸਰ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੈਕੰਡਰੀ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਆ। ਆਪਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਪਰ ਹੁਣ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਕੇਸ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹ ਰਹੇ ਆ। They're opening more cases. Hopefully we're going to be seeing more accountability. Loki, there was a video I just saw this morning of the entire Black Lives Matter protest standing still surrounding the mayor of Minneapolis, questioning him if he's going to do anything about this. That is revolutionary. When in the past have politicians been this accountable before? Right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's huge. It really is. I know we're cutting it really close now. So we unfortunately don't have the time to go into what are some of the solutions to these problems, right? This we kind of addressed. What are some things that we can begin doing as a community right away so that we are standing in solidarity? But I know the solutions piece might take us a little bit longer, so maybe we can have that chat at a different time as we even learn more about what is happening around us. But, lastly, in these, last 5-7 minutes that we've got, maybe, we bring it back to Sikhi, right? We bring it back to our history. We bring it back to so many examples we have of us fighting oppression, so that if there's any takeaway, maybe this can be it, right? We maybe talk a little bit more about Ikonkar. We talk about, Nirpal and Nirvad, right? If there's no hatred, there can only be love. right? We talk about that collective oneness.
6 o'clock.
In these last few minutes we have, because this will be a great, message to walk away from.
I've been saying this literally for the past couple of days, and we need to start taking some of the things that we've learned in Sikhi and we need to implement them. And this kind of touches on what are some of the solutions. The question that you asked earlier, I've been telling this to people all the time. Langar is great. The concept of langar is great, but we're going to need something a little more than langar right now. Now is not the time for langar. Langar is great. The message behind langar that we've watered down into just free food, number one, which is a terrible thing. But we don't need free food right now. We need something more than that. There are many shaheeds who got up and sacrificed their life for stuff like this. We're asking the people to get up and stand with us. That's what we need in this time. We don't need roti and dal right now. But we need to start taking those things that we learned from the Guru and put them actually into practice and apply them where they need to be applied. And that's what can help the situation right now.
In the Aasees, we look upon our gurus, and this Divas is actually about to come. The month of July, there's a Divas that a lot of people forget. It's Miri Piri Divas. A lot of people call it Shastirtaran Divas. It's the day that this concept was established of devotion, but also activism, right? We as Sikhs focus a lot on the Bhakti aspect, but right now is also the time for Shakti. So as Sikhs, we need to arm our voices. We need to get up and we need to stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Whether that's marching in a protest, whether that's posting on social media, whether that's educating yourselves and centering Black voices and Black people. To act as now. It's not when in the future when your grandchildren are going to ask you what you did during Black Lives Matter, don't bow your head in shame. Speak for your future self now.
Yeah, you're right. It's not too late for us to refocus our energies, right? Reshift our thought processes and reframe how we think about colorism. How do we break away from these stereotypes that we adapted after moving to, our countries now? How do we do all of that so that we don't have to be ashamed of ourselves? Because, we have the time to change it. It's not going to take much effort for us to stop saying the N-word or for us to stop, saying, tu kinni gori chittiyan or tera rang kinna kala, stuff like that. Don't play in the sun. You're going to get dark. Or any of these other things that we've talked about, right? We still have the time and the energy and the resources to start talking about privilege at our Gurmat camps, right? Those are spaces that we control ourselves. Those spaces are not dictated by anyone else. We control that programming, right? We bring other voices to those camps. We start talking about race relations, because we have the privilege to be able to do that in our spaces. When we're talking about our Virsa, we really go into all of these examples that we touched on today, right? From Guru Amar Das Ji, starting with Guru Nanak Sahib, right? Guru Amar Das, we've got Guru Arjan Dev, we've got Bandi Chhod Divas, then we've got Guru Tegh Bahadur, and then Guru Gobind Singh. We've got countless examples of what it means to stand against oppression, even if it does not affect you one bit, right? We really need to start honing in these ideals and this history so that when we see uprisings, when we see gatherings all across the world, and we've got millions of people protesting, we don't look at that as something that is foreign, right? When we do Virsa classes, we need to talk about the Ghadar Party. We need to talk about the Ghadar movement, right? The history behind that is great. but I doubt many of us know it living in North America. We need to talk about what the civil rights movement did for us to be able to move to this country and build these lives for ourselves. And we need to give credit where credit is due. And all of these are very small efforts that different community members can start taking so that we are working towards that collective liberation, so that we go beyond just thinking about ourselves and what the quote unquote sick issue is. Because like Soorma Singh said, if it is affecting the humanity, it automatically becomes a sick issue. So, that is a call out for all of us to start caring deeply about all of this. I doubt we've got more than 2-3 minutes left at this point, so I ask both of y'all if you have any last messages you would like to share.
Just coming from me, not even as a Sikh, as a Black man in America who happens to, living in post 9/11 America, where the turban and beard is stigmatized as a terrorist. And, as a Black Sikh, I walk out of my door every day with the thought of, this may be my last day. I'd go inside of my house and think, this may be my last day, because they like to break and enter and kill us there too. But I go out and I don't have fear, because I know the Guru is with me. I know my fellow African American community is behind me. I would love to know that my fellow Sikh community is backing me and is supporting me. That would do me all the great in the world. I can't change what's going to happen when I walk out of the door. But if it does happen to me, let me die knowing that you guys are behind me. That would do all the help in the world for me. And it would do all the help in the world for the rest of the African American community and any other community that is going through something right now. That no matter what happens, the Guru's Sikhs are going to be there. Because that's what we do. We need to remember who we are. Because when we remember who we are and what we're capable of, we can change this world.
Thank you. Manveer Singh, that is tough to follow, but...
Yes, I won't say much because I cannot top that. All I'm going to say is when we say dig, dig, fateh, we know the dig, we need the dig, and then we'll get fateh. Black Lives Matter. I'm going to cut it at that.
Awesome. Thank you both for joining us today on Sikh Channel, for having a very thoughtful and mindful discussion around what Black Lives Matter is, what the movement is about, and how as Sikhs, and speaking for myself and Manveer Singh, how as non-Black people of color, what are some of the steps we can take so that we start becoming better allies, so that we can be supportive. And Manveer Singh, I want to apologize to you again for messing up the territories in the beginning. I think the nerves of this conversation got
it's okay.
Apologize about that. I got it right when I practiced, but to start. But thank you both so much for having this conversation really from the core of your heart and getting real about these issues, about why we have the jimmewari and the farz to stand up and speak against oppression. Okay, on that note, we'll keep in touch and we'll keep everybody watching updated on follow-up conversations on this topic with some other speakers, and also on any community resources that we can share. So keep a lookout for all of that. And with that, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.